You're listening to Finding Your Future in Food Systems.
Hello, everyone. We're going to get started. So, good evening and welcome to NAFSN, the North American Food Systems Network. My name is Natalie Cruz, and I am the leadership co director of NAFSN. I'm a writer and educator specializing in decolonized food work. NAFSN is a professional development organization for people working together to strengthen local and regional food systems. And as a sister affiliate of the Journal of Agriculture, Food Systems, and Community Development, we strive to connect members with the full package, from employment and educational opportunities to networking with researchers and learning from their insights. We hope that you'll join NAFSN as we continue to shine a spotlight on the emerging food systems profession. Our monthly leadership meetings are open to the public on the first Wednesday of every month. Simply reach out to either me, Natalie Cruz, or my co-director, Kim Hines, and we'll send you a little special invitation request. My email will be presented at the very end, so do not worry. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce today to Jeffrey Shu and Latiuna Sema Nusila as our hosts for tonight. Take it away, Jeffrey.
Sorry, folks, you'll have to bear with my internet for a little bit. We just had our fire alarm pulled, so I apologize if the connection's a little spotty. Thanks, Natalie, and thank you all for joining us for Finding Your Future in Food Systems. For those of you tuning in for the first time, this is a series produced and hosted by students to help emerging professionals and others navigate the wide range of quickly evolving career opportunities in community food systems work. My name is Jeffrey, a third year food science and global development major at Cornell University and a student staff member for NAFSN. Season 9 will also be co hosted by members of the Cornell University chapter of Minorities in Agricultural, Natural Resources, and Related Sciences, otherwise known as MANNERS. I am joined
Thanks for that introduction, Jeffrey. Hey everyone, my name is Latiuna Sema Lucila, but Sema for short. I am a third-year undergraduate in agricultural sciences at Cornell University and a student researcher in the Calvert lab, where we study the below-ground ecology of invasive plants and weeds. It's great to be here today with Kim, Natalie, and our speakers, and everyone in attendance. It is also very encouraging that more than 180 people, wow, 180 people have registered for this event today. And this webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all registrants later this week by email.
Before we get started, we'd like to sincerely thank this season's series sponsor, FarmWise, an innovative statewide value chain development initiative at Indiana University. We'd also like to acknowledge and appreciate our full year sponsors, Grapevine Local Food Marketing, Roots of Change, Cliff Family Foundation, and Harrisdale Homestead.
It's great to see so many people in attendance, and we encourage you to keep your video on if you choose. For our speakers to have a better understanding of who is present with us today, please add to the chat your name, location, and your areas of interest in food systems work. If you are currently affiliated with a food systems organization, institution, or agency, please add that as well. NAFTN is all about professional networking, so please take advantage of this opportunity to meet and connect with others throughout the chat today. Throughout the webinar, we'd also like to ask you to write questions of our guest speakers in the chat. Jeffrey will curate these questions for you during a Q&A with each speaker.
NAFSN is headquartered in Ithaca, New York. We offer this land acknowledgement created by Cornell University's American Indian and Indigenous Studies program, reviewed and approved by the traditional Gayacono leadership. Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayacono of the Cayuga Nation. The Gayacono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of Gayacono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Gayacono people, past and present, to these lands and waters. We have three guest speakers with us today. First, we will hear from Robert Lee from Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. Then we'll hear from Mara Momenee from the city of Toledo, Ohio. And we will finish our conversation with Brian Calvert of Civil Eats. It's a pleasure to meet all of you, and we are excited to get started. Please remember to put any of your questions that you may have for our guest speakers in the chat. I will curate these for you after each speaker presents.
Please give a warm welcome to our first speaker, Robert Lee. Robert Lee is a Gates Millennium Scholar who graduated cum laude from New York University. Coming from a humble background, he is committed to doing all that he can to help those in need. At NYU, Robert worked on a club called Two Birds, One Stone, which delivers the leftover dining hall foods to homeless shelters. Over the 4 years that Robert was a part of this organization, he learned best practices of operations in delivering food, fostered relationship with the industry, and honed volunteer management skills. During Robert's 3 years as president, he has helped the organization receive the NYU Green Grant for the Best Green Initiative on campus and led volunteers to deliver over 12,000 pounds of food. After graduating, Robert worked at JP Morgan Chase and Company before continuing his passion of helping the hungry and reducing wasted food by co-founding Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, Inc. Without further ado, please take it away, Robert.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, and thank you so much for the opportunity to speak about our work and my personal professional journey. I always like to kind of just, start with my own personal story and my own background, just because it's really relevant to kind of the work and the decisions that I've made in kind of, the path that I've chosen to go on. And I think it's a very typical kind of immigrant story where my parents came looking for a better life and landed in New York City, where unfortunately they just didn't know the language, and so they struggled. And I grew up honestly thinking that food insecurity and hunger was just kind of the normal circumstance and that everyone was struggling. And it would be kind of a normal thing for me to watch my parents skip meals, and we would sometimes have just one bowl of ramen, and that'd be it for the whole day. And essentially, I think with like any Asian parent, they very much focused on education as kind of that way out. And I was fortunate enough to go to NYU for finance and accounting. And I was very much focused on getting a career in finance and very much kind of going down the path of investment banking and in general kind of finance career. And that was when I came across the club that Suma just mentioned, where I was really kind of just obsessed with this idea that this club brought leftover dining hall food to homeless shelters. And this was like back in like 2009. And I had never even heard of the concept of food rescue. I think the terminology of food rescue wasn't even around back then. And I just really only got involved because I really thought it was a huge issue that they didn't donate the excess food from dining halls on weekends. And so I really just joined to kind of solve that small problem. And before I knew it, I basically was, trying to solve other problems. Like, why don't we work with other dining halls? Why don't we work with this, homeless shelter, food pantry? And overall, I think it was a slow kind of evolution of getting more involved in the industry of food rescue. And after graduating, I did work full time at JP Morgan, as was mentioned, and quickly realized that it wasn't really fulfilling, and it wasn't really something that I wanted to do. And I know a lot of folks in college think about what they will likely do after graduation, and um, sometimes the path is not as clear or as linear as you plan. And I think it's really important to kind of have that open-mindedness to, try different things and be involved in different clubs like to Bridgman Stone, and, really pursue what you like doing and what you like, having impact in. And so After working at JP Morgan for about a year, I quit my job and went full time in rescuing La Cuisine. And I was back in 2014. I remember I was thinking, hey, I'm gonna, give this a shot and try to meet certain metrics. I think at that time I was trying to get like 30,000 pounds of food or something like that in that first year. And if I didn't meet that, I would, go off to business school. That was my plan B. And so, yeah, I essentially, we kind of lucked out right before year two, and kind of not quite meeting expectations of where we wanted to be. We got incubated by the Robin Hood Foundation through the Blue Ridge Labs fellowship, and that really kind of changed my perspective on what a nonprofit could be. Through that, incubator, we learned obviously how to kind of use technology more, developed our Ruby on Rails web application a little bit more in depth, and also built out a business model, which I, really wasn't thinking about when I, first launched into Rescuing Life Cuisine. But that was when we started charging a fee for service for our food donor partners. And so just to take a step back and kind of explain kind of how, we work at Rescuing Left Cuisine. We're obviously a 501c3 nonprofit organization, but you can think of us really as a logistics company, a transportation company, taking all the excess food that a restaurant or catering company, food business may throw out at the end of the night, and instead bringing that, transporting that to homeless shelters, food kitchens, food pantries nearby that can use that food. And so we have learned that there's a lot of benefits that these food businesses can actually get by donating their excess food, including enhanced tax deductions, reduced food disposal costs, more marketing, and of course, with those kind of bottom line impacts, we can capture some of that value and basically offset the costs of doing that transportation, right? Whether it's gas, whether it's labor, and essentially our kind of thought is that for food rescue to become a permanent and long-lasting movement, it needs to be obviously scalable and something that can be um, done by not just people who are looking to be charitable, but something that is inherent within a business. And so we really try to make it a win-win-win. And if you face it, I mean, food businesses, all businesses are looking to make money. And if we can make a case to reduce their costs or help them make more money, we can make this concept of food rescue much more of a habit. And so that's kind of how we operate. I think there's a lot of, I think I can go on for hours about how many, all the stats on kind of wasted food and food insecurity, and especially right now, unfortunately, there's so much going on with food snap cuts and changes in USDA funding and things like that. And so overall, there's just a lot that's happening, and a lot that needs to be done by groups like the folks I'm seeing in the chat who are here today. So with that, I think apparently I have reached the time, I think so, or at least I'm looking at the time and thinking maybe I need to hand it over to the questions for 5 minutes, but let me know if I have more time to talk more about the work. I'm seeing a few questions in the chat. Yeah, go for it.
I believe Jeffrey is having some technical difficulties, so I'll just step in to ask the questions that I see in the chat.
Sure. Yeah,
Um,
not a problem.
so a question we have from Eleanor is, what tips do you have for starting a food rescue program? I ask because I work for an Oregon, Chicago's West Side that is trying to start this.
Yeah, I think starting a food rescue program is tough. I think sometimes when we first got started in New York City, we reached out and learned kind of what other groups were doing and started to understand that there was a gap in the New York City market where City Harvest and Food Bank of New York were doing incredible work and using trucks to transport the excess food. Again, I described RLC as a transportation logistics company in nonprofit form. And if you look at the model of City Harvest and Food Bank of New York, they're also very similar in that they use trucks and their logistics, operation, right? They operate these trucks and they, transport excess food. And for that to be something that is really efficient, you want to ensure that you have, trucks being packed in for every pickup that you do. And so what we realized was that they had a minimum pound requirement. And back in 2013, when we started, it was 50 pounds of food. And so they wouldn't go buy for food businesses that wanted to donate 40 pounds of food, for example. And 40 pounds of food is, a good amount of food, right? It's enough to feed 30 people, which is the size of a mid-sized homeless shelter, right? And so, we wanted to fill that gap and do what we can to operate within the industry. And so I say all this mostly because I think, for those who are always looking to start a food rescue program, always ask the question of what already exists in the industry already and in the area, and how can we kind of partner, because we pass off large food donor partners to City Harvest and Food Bank, and they pass us the ones that are too small for their trucks. And so we can kind of create this ecosystem and help each other out and create this all-encompassing network that allows food donor partners to donate, whether or not it's us or someone else. And so yeah, the first thing I think is the research of seeing what exists. How can we partner? How can we help? Because we do have, RLC does have a branch in Chicago that we launched in 2 years ago. And so we're happy to provide technology help, provide volunteers, and let people know about the program in Chicago's West Side that you all are talking about. So
Hey, thank you. There's another question from Brady in the chat who asks, how have you been able to convince companies to put the extra effort into preventing food waste or in working with you?
yeah, that's a great question. I think it's interesting because the extra effort is perceived as something that is insurmountable, but honestly, it's one of those things where it's like food waste equals costs. Like you're wasting product, you're wasting ingredients, you're wasting for restaurants and for food businesses. Um, and so preventing food waste is a win-win-win for everyone, right? You reduce your costs, which means you have more profit, right? And the extra effort is worth it because you're going to have more profit, right? And so no one complains if you're going to do more extra effort to get more money. Like no one complains about that. Everyone just perceives this as like this major lift, but it's not, right? And I think what nonprofits generally don't do is show the dollar value of the services they provide. And so I think, convincing companies, you have to show that, bottom line impact. At the end of the day, that's what all of these businesses are here for, right? They're structured to make money, to create value for the shareholders, right? And so, convincing them is going to have to involve the bottom line. On top of that, honestly, I personally think that there's no such thing as convincing. I think, in a lot of ways, people have their own, priorities and agendas, and they need to essentially be aligned with yours, right? So if the, chief revenue officer is in charge of, increasing sales, then you have to show him how your effort or your, initiative is going to align with increasing sales for him, right? And so, or her. And so I think in general, aligning those incentives is the main way to kind of, show these companies that preventing food waste is a common goal that we can all, be happy about.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. So, are there any institutional or policy barriers that you or Rescuing Leftover Cuisine have come across during your time that have been inhibitory to the work that the organization has tried to undertake? And if so, how have you navigated these challenges?
It's a really great question. I think I don't think there's any legislation that really has blocked or made it difficult to do our specific work. I think legislation and the overall legal landscape is definitely something that's been interesting in the food rescue space. Right when we first started, you know, I kept on referencing the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act of 1996, which is super old, even considering, sorry, I don't want to say that 1996 is super old, but to me at that time, I was thinking it's super old. I mean, like this has been around forever, and it was 2009. And now it's sitting in 2025, the Food Donation Improvement Act, there are other legislations that have kind of made food rescue more and more, prevalent. Um, and I think that there's positive momentum there. At the same time, I think there's a shift away from kind of the government and federal government being in the business of providing food to those who are facing food insecurity. I think that's going to be a detriment to the work as well. But I do think that interestingly enough, food rescue is something that has bipartisan support because obviously, this is food that's going to waste, that's completely fine, and it can reduce the amount of spending we spend on programs that are being attacked right now, right? And so there's a lot of, I think, kind of commonalities, and there's a lot that legislation can do to help push this movement forward even more because the enhanced tax deductions for donating food is a very complicated calculation. I think that it can be way, way simpler. And it could be, instead of a deduction, it could be a credit. Right? And so there's a lot of things that can be done to kind of remove the perceived roadblocks for food businesses to donate their excess food. But I can go on for hours about that specific topic as well. So I'll stop there.
All right.
I know
Well,
I'm probably over time as well. Yeah.
No, you're good. Thank you very much for taking the time to share a slice of your work and of your world with us and with our audience tonight. I see that there are a lot more questions from Amira, from Mahana, from Maddie, from Grace, Sydney, Samantha. So if you would be willing, Robert, to take a few minutes to respond to those that'd be I think that'd be wonderful. But thank you again for your time tonight. And I'll turn it back over to Sema to introduce our next speaker.
Our second speaker for the night is Mara Momenee. Mara Momenee is from the city of Toledo's first food policy manager, a role she stepped into after earning her master's in community and regional planning from the University of Oregon. She began her career with the city as a planner, helping embed food system priorities into Toledo's new comprehensive plan before transitioning into her current position. Mara's work focuses on building a stronger, more equitable local food system by supporting everything from growing and processing to distribution and access. Current initiatives include easing barriers to urban agriculture, creating a new urban food production grant program, exploring healthy retail incentives, conducting a citywide food policy audit, and researching models for a regional food policy council. Mara is a steering committee member of the Ohio Food Policy Network and is actively involved with NAFSN's CARET cohort and the ACRE community of practice, connecting Toledo's efforts to broader state and national conversations. Thank you for taking the time to share a bit about your personal and professional journey with us today. Mara, I'll turn it over to you now.
All right, thank you, Seema. I'm going to share my screen. I prepared a presentation for you all. So, can you all see that screen? Good? All right. Well, as Seema said, my position, food policy manager, is brand new at the city. So I'm excited to share, kind of elaborate on some of the things he just mentioned today. I'm going to do a quick 5 minutes kind of diving into my role and then 5 minutes on my background, and then would love to take any questions you all have. So let's jump in. So I met with the city years ago and I said, I'm interested in food and sustainability. Do you do that here? And at the time they said, no, they do not. But fast forward, coming back to Toledo after grad school, I was really encouraged to see that the city has come a long way and that food access is now a main goal in our new comprehensive plan for Toledo. So it's been very promising to see Toledo take this commitment to embed food policy into the local government with this commitment in our comprehensive plan and creating my position. In a nutshell, I'm charged with creating policy and programs that impact our food system. So I tell people, what does that mean? Everything from helping, with farming, the planting of a seed, all the way through processing, distribution, access to markets, how people are being, preparing that food. Do they have the right equipment, all the way to food waste? And would love to pick Robert's brain more on food rescue, because that is something that I'm very interested in trying to support here in Toledo. Because this role is brand new, I took a page from my friend Zainab, who does this work in Cleveland, and started with a listening tour. So my first few months, I just interviewed as many folks as I could. I talked with over 60 food system stakeholders and have been distilling all of those findings into kind of some key themes that have been guiding my work. So that's been really helpful, and it was an awesome way just to start building relationships with community. Just to briefly go over some of the key initiatives that were already mentioned, I've kind of distilled all the tasks in my position into what I'm calling jumpstart projects, and then what I'm calling long range projects. So everything from supporting urban ag, healthy retail, creating partnerships with higher ed, all the way to kind of the things that are going to take a little bit longer, the audit that was mentioned, and laying the foundation for a food policy council. So I'm just going to briefly touch on each of those. One of the things I heard on the listening tour in terms of urban ag barriers are people are having a huge issue with the permitting process. So I've been working with Building Inspection and Plan Commission to make it so that if you would like a high tunnel or a greenhouse or some sort of structure to extend your growing season, you won't have to get an architectural stamp drawing now. You won't have to pay a huge fee to get a special use permit. How can we make this as easy as possible for folks to extend their growing season? Another barrier is land access. As many of you know, getting started farming is finding secure land that you're going to be able to farm for years into the future, and it won't get snatched from under you because a shinier development comes along. So I'm actually working in partnership with the land bank to launch a new program called Farm-A-Lot, which will hopefully pair people with land opportunities in a lease to own model. And then to complement that work, I just gave a presentation to City Council to request funds for an urban ag grant program that will hopefully address some of those other initial barriers, the inputs you need to get farming, trying to make that as flexible as possible, because you know how grants can get pretty arduous. Just, as few strings attached as possible for this program, I think would be helpful. In terms of healthy retail, one of my first, I think, wins, I would call it, for this position was I completed a dollar store study in the city and implemented some new zoning regulations that put spacing requirements on dollar stores, because they are shown to exacerbate the food desert or low access, low income issue, and trying to make it more competitive for other alternative retail models. So we, with that study, stopped the spread of dollar stores, and now we're working with Plan Commission on a healthy food overlay, which will hopefully be a package of zoning incentives, economic development incentives to promote the retail we would like to see, with an emphasis on areas that need it most in the city. And then also working in conjunction with the health department on their new healthy food small market pilot program, which is working with 5 stores, helping them upgrade their equipment, source fresh produce, get the marketing they need, get incentive programs like produce perks, and really starting to help shift these smaller models that are already present in communities. So really excited to launch that over the next few weeks here. And then in terms of higher ed partnerships, really want to tap into our universities. I am very excited. Last night I presented to a class that's going to help me at University of Toledo research kind of those alternative retail models like farm stops and cooperatives, mobile markets. What can we do in addition to advocating for full service grocery stores in these low access, low income neighborhoods? And then also made a connection recently at Bowling Green State University on some soil testing resources that I'm hoping to layer with the Farm-A-Lot initiative I mentioned. Diving into the longer range projects, I was tasked with doing an audit to see where we are at. So of course I started with, well, what audit tools are out there? And that's when I happened upon NAFSN and the CARET tool, and was very excited to see that this cohort was going on this year and that is going to build upon the findings from last year. So I'm in that cohort this year. I'm working with a small team of folks to use the CARET tool. It has 101 questions across 7 different themes to measure kind of the health and resilience of your food system. And that's going to show us our gap areas that we can then use to build towards a food action plan. And then in terms of, well, how are we going to do all of this work and how are we going to shape food policy? I am very much advocating for forming a food policy council of some sort. And that was something in my position, a task in my position as well. So I've been researching best practices or what's working in other cities. There are 21 other food policy councils across the state of Ohio, with a gap in Northwest Ohio. So what can we learn from our neighbors? What's working in other cities? Where are these councils hosted? How are they funded? I just applied for a USDA Regional Food Systems Partnership grant that, if we are gifted, would give us $200,000 to support a very robust planning process to kind of co-create this together with community members. And the idea would be to take the findings from the audit and then pave the way for working groups and kind of those priority areas. So a bit about my background and how I convinced people that I could do this job. I'm still facing a lot of imposter syndrome, but I'm coming around to the fact that it was a windy journey, but I have a lot of experience that has touched many parts of the food system. And that's kind of what I'm advocating for today is, weaving your story together and showing the relevancy of your work that you've done. So I got interested back in high school. I did a project on, I know the term food desert is kind of going out of style in our profession, but at the time it was kind of emerging in academic literature. And my sister, who is an urban planner, introduced it to me. And so I chose that as the topic for a year-long project. That kind of opened my eyes to just the many systemic planning policy issues that led to the issue to begin with. And it sent me to Ohio State, where I studied environment, economy, development, and sustainability with a minor in planning. My program was aiming to break down silos between all of these different professions, environmental science, economics, community development. I also got very involved in student organizing and trying to change institutional purchasing at Ohio State through the Real Food Challenge. Also worked closely with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, trying to advocate for the Fair Food Program. A lot of protests in front of Wendy's in my college days. So that was all very formative. And then I had some pretty awesome times interning with the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity, and was able to get linked up with a community hub where I did my thesis project on forming a garden class and helping, I got some funding and I used it to help people establish home gardens and kind of coach them through the summer. When I was gearing up to graduate, I was like, I do not want to be a sustainability consultant like my peers. That sounds not like something I want to do. I don't know what I want to do. I want to impact the food system. So I thought it could be really, really cool, informative to get some on the ground farming experience. So went on to do AmeriCorps, have worked on a handful of farms, both rural and urban, did that kind of in the in-between phase between undergrad and graduate school. Farming is really hard, as many of you know, and I was not in a good place to run my own, farm to sustain myself at that point in life. So I decided, where would I be able to make kind of most of an impact in terms of policy at the local level, and found myself applying for a master's in planning. And went out to University of Oregon. They have a really progressive farmland preservation, set of policies for the state, a lot of affordable housing policies. So learned a lot in that program. Every internship I had, every project opportunity I had, I framed it around some sort of food, issue, just to add that component to the planning profession. When it came time to graduate, a planner position was open with Toledo, and I was very much feeling called back to home and my community and wanting to make an impact, and had the awesome opportunity, as was mentioned, to help with the Forward Toledo plan, kind of embedding some of those food systems issues into the plan that I thought were missing. That's also around the time when I got tapped in with the Ohio Food Policy Network Steering Committee. I was just very clear with my supervisors, like, I'm interested in food. Can I go to this conference? I learned that there was a gap of representation in Northwest Ohio, and I thought I could help fill that gap. So it's been an awesome time, just getting really embedded in the food system here in Toledo, meeting new people every day. Um, I tried to distill, I hope this isn't too corny, but some key takeaways that I kind of took away from my windy path to get to this job now is just being very, very clear about what your interests are to your supervisors and the folks you're working with, advocating for those interests. I have interviewed so many people in professions where I'm like, I want to do what you do, or you wrote a book that I really love. Can I pick your brain for a little bit as I prepare for this interview? And then like all the random bits and pieces and jobs that did not make the resume, like my stint at the sauerkraut factory or my time as a representative for Shagbark Seed and Mill. It's like, okay, well, that did have a place in the story as well. So just kind of like weaving together, that gave me insight into small scale food processing and everything that goes into that. So I would take that as, experience. So just kind of telling your story and all the experiences you have across the vast food system, and then something I am kind of facing every day in this new position. And you can see from this picture the look of fear in my eyes at this press conference is just taking on these challenges as they come. Saying yes to the podcast interview, even though you're terrified, going to the press conference, signing up for the study that, you might not know all the pieces yet, but the people who can help. So those are just some key takeaways that I've learned along the way. So I'd love to answer any questions, and I would love to stay connected with all you.
All right, thank you very much. I think we have time for just one question. But so I'll start it off with, or ask Haley's question here, where they ask if you had faced any type of pushback from within the city when you were trying to implement some of these changes, and then how you sort of navigated that.
Yeah, so it's been a lot of waiting on responses from different departments. I think people kind of scoff at the food policy title in some regards. Why are taxpayer dollars being spent on this position? So it's been a lot of meeting one-on-one with those departments and sharing kind of the why this is important to focus on from a local government standpoint, kind of making that personal connection. Sometimes dropping by people's offices, I know it can, maybe you have to get that meeting scheduled. So just following up with folks. And I think it's gonna be a lot of education along the way and breaking down kind of the terminology that we all, are very familiar with. When I say food system, what does that mean? What does food sovereignty mean, and why are we trying to work towards it? There was just an article posted in the city, all the city channels on my job, and just seeing some of the community feedback on, oh, food deserts are because people steal and they're lazy. It's like there's a big educational push that needs to happen, I believe, and just trying to change the narrative with key community partners who are also doing this work, I think is going to be a big piece of it.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'm sorry that we're running a little bit short on time here.
That's okay. I went over a little bit too.
No, no, it's very, very much okay. If you could, Mara, also just answer a couple questions that are left in the chat, that would also be very helpful to the members of our audience. And I will also invite Sima back to the conversation to introduce our third speaker.
Our third speaker is Brian Calvert from Civil Eats. Brian Calvert is the senior editor at Civil Eats. He is the former editor-in-chief of High Country News, a former associate editor at Earth Island Journal, and a former TED Scripps Fellow in Environmental Journalism at the University of Colorado Boulder. Brian has worked as a media consultant, editor, writer, and radio producer in a career spanning 25 years. His work has appeared in The Vox, the New York Times Magazine, Pacific Standard, and many others. He enjoys hiking, backpacking, running, and surfing. I will turn it over to Brian now.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for being here. My name is Brian. I was born in 1975, so according to Robert, I've been around for twice as long as forever. But I've been in journalism for my entire career. Um, sort of, I'm here to, I think, represent a way of being inside a food system or any system that is almost from the outside and observing it. And that is this sort of mysterious art of journalism, which in when I came into the profession was very much a blue collar, every city had a paper kind of profession. And what you would do is you would work from a small newspaper into a larger newspaper and into a larger newspaper. And your job was to inform the broad public of facts about what was happening around them in their cities, in their governments. And then those folks would take that and make an informed decision when voting inside of a democracy. That was kind of how I started my profession. And my interest was in foreign policy. So I spent a lot of time overseas. I worked in a significant amount of time in Cambodia, and China and Afghanistan, with lots of other travel in between. And a good portion of that was building out newsrooms for local journalists so that they could watchdog their governments. And eventually I realized that there was a larger story happening, which was the climate. The climate was changing. It wasn't really being talked about that much, especially in journalism. And so I quit work abroad and came back to the States to really focus on environmental issues and particularly the climate. And that led me to kind of think about not just the environment as a natural system, but the political systems that go around it. And that led me to questions about fairness and whether or not I think there's a big question inside of environmentalism, perhaps in food systems, certainly in the climate question around is humanity going to like sort of make it? Are we going to overcome the climate crisis or the climate challenge? What's that going to mean? And what I have found in my work is that I am less interested in that long-term answer and outcome than I am with questions of fairness right now and equity, and who has access to what good things. And I think that disparity is probably going to grow over time, but I find meaning in my work as a journalist in sort of examining some of those questions. So all those things kind of were on my mind. And I eventually was able to study environmental policy at the University of Colorado, Boulder, and sort of some law and philosophy as well, and put that into journalism. And I did that by running a magazine in the Western United States called High Country News. And there I, kind of helped, I think, advance some environmental coverage of the Western United States through questions of politics, social justice, equity, and fairness in a way that I think sort of expanded these ideas around environmentalism. And I left High Country News during the pandemic because we got a new publisher, and he and I didn't see eye to eye on where that magazine should go. So I walked away. And eventually, after the pandemic sort of settled, I found my way through some other environmental magazines and finally here to Civil Eats. So I've been at Civil Eats for a year. And I find it to be some of the most rewarding journalism there is. That's because I think food, and you all know this, but food and food systems touch everything. There are huge questions inside of it, including on fairness and equity, but also health and nutrition. I myself grew up in a very rural, poor household in Wyoming, and our nutrition was seasonal. So there was sort of like you spent all summer kind of fishing and gathering firewood for the winter, and you spent all fall hunting to fill up your freezer. And whatever you had in your freezer was what you had for the winter. until spring came. So I kind of understand food insecurity in this like kind of like interesting way because we really always had to make it work where we were from. Um, but I also know that we had access to nature in a way that helped us sort of overcome that. So that's kind of an interesting question for me. But I also think that inside the climate question, inside of food policy questions, there's a lot of work that can be done, good work that can be done by like a lot of folks here in the chat. Um, and I think my job is to help inform that work for people to either expose deficiencies in policy, for example, or examine policies. Um, or I also like highlighting the work of other people that could kind of point the way to solutions for other folks. And so I think that Civil Eats does a really good job of that in general. What has happened since the last election and the incoming administration, President Trump, is that we have had to really pivot around these policy questions because there are so many changes and they're happening so quickly that they are demanding a lot of journalists. And so, one of the things that we've done at Civil Eats, and this was like a big conversation uh, when the new administration was coming in, was how are we going to handle this? And so we built this thing called the Food Policy Tracker, thinking, oh, we'll just, there'll be updates and we'll just kind of keep that updated and that'll keep people up to date on whatever policy changes are happening. But that is like basically turned into a news operation inside of a online magazine because there are so many big changes happening so often with major ramifications that they warrant coverage. And so the way that we're approaching this work now is to try to think about what you all need as readers, thinkers, movers in these spaces, and try to deliver that on a relevant timeline because it's changing so fast that if we can't really sit on things for 3 days sometimes, or it's going to be like old. Um, and so trying to figure out how to deliver meaningful information to people and also to put it in its proper context in this fast pace is the challenge for us right now. So I think that kind of in the context of this conversation, what I'm interested in learning from you all is how everyone in here is dealing with uh, this onslaught of policy change and the different ways that it's sort of impacting you all. I think, I think I would just sort of open it up to questions from you all for that. Rather than I think Civil Eats is a fairly straightforward food policy. We're going to sort of cover the way that federal food policy works from the different agencies, and we're interested in where those policies hit people downstream.
All right, thank you very much. I'm looking at the chat, and I'm not seeing a direct question with that regard specifically, or a comment. But I do see one from Leanne, who asks, "Are there any glaring reporting gaps that you have noticed in the past few years in food equity, food sovereignty, and/or regenerative agriculture?"
Um, that's a good question because if my job is to see those things and I can't see what I don't see. I think that what's interesting to me is that there's a disparity in coverage between okay, you've sort of got like regenerative agriculture, permaculture, agroecology. That's kind of gets its own coverage inside of its own little wheelhouse. And then sort of like somewhere far beyond that are the sort of commodity farmers and row crop farmers. And so we've got, soybean and corns and stuff like that. And that stuff is kind of like covered as a business. And I think what Civil Eats tries to do, or the sort of the gap we try to overcome, is to try to figure out how all of that works together. Because really we're talking about big environmental questions of land use, and economics and nutrition, and then of course waste. Um, so there are a lot of sort of policy things that I think need to be covered holistically. So it's not that I see like particular gaps. I think we would all do well to put all of these things in the same context and try to understand why someone would be moved to monocrop soy, um, versus do something else with that land. What are the why would someone make that choice? So those kind of things I think are interesting.
Another question that I have here is that many of the folks who would likely benefit the most from your writing or reading the writing of fellow journalists from Civil Eats will probably never directly seeking it out. So what do you and Civil Eats do to ensure that your work reaches a wider audience?
Hmm. Yeah, this is sort of like this is a perennial question inside of niche journalism. So Civil Eats has a community of readers, and our first job is to give them really good in-depth information about what they're interested in. And then our second job is to sort of like, yeah, kind of like reach out and try to find folks who may be curious about these things but don't know where to find it. And that is tricky because sometimes to grow an audience, you have to simplify the information that you deliver, because not everyone is so interested in deep dives all the time. But if you aren't delivering deep dives to your dedicated readers, then you're sort of letting them down. And so what we try to do is what a lot of journalism has tried to do since the advent of social media, which is just do really in-depth stuff for your website, and then try to get it simplified versions of it out in a way that can either through threads or Instagram or stories or something like that. You just try to sort of like, you have to distill some of this very complicated stuff into really basic storytelling. And so that's kind of how we manage that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. So I see one here from Maddie, who asks, do you have any experiences or fears of censorship from the current administration?
I I don't so this is interesting. I think this is a great question. I do not personally feel like there's pressure on a newsroom yet. Um, I have worked in countries that are autocratic, Cambodia especially, China also. Um, and what kind of happens in autocratic countries is there is a zeitgeist that is built around being quiet, not sticking your head up, not getting in trouble. And that can build out of big punishments. And so if you see a big university being punished for some policies, then maybe you're going to be quiet because you're another university or you're someone else. And so what we've seen in journalism are some sources and some stories that didn't go as far as they could have, or we had to stop reporting them because people weren't comfortable sticking their neck out. And so I think the challenge there is one of this chilling effect. We haven't reached a stage here yet beyond lawsuits, which we are seeing against journalism organizations, but we haven't really seen a very hardline crackdown on journalism. But I expect that there will be a chilling effect from a lot of different things that are happening around us that we'll all need to contend with and all need to, I think, confront in our own minds going forward.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to share a little bit about your experience and also your expertise with us tonight.
I'm going to put my my email in chat. I'm happy to continue this conversation with anybody over email. So please feel free to email me there.
All right. So we want to again extend a big thank you once again to all of our guest speakers for sharing their experiences so generously during our first episode of the season. I would also like to say thank you to everyone for bearing with my technical difficulties earlier today. The speakers' contact information shown here on the slide will be included along with a recording and an email sent to you. So please keep an eye out for that. And now I'd like to bring Natalie and all of our speakers back into the conversation.
Hello, everyone. Oh my God, we had such a wonderful hour with you all and with our wonderful speakers. I can just continue having this like just listening to all of our speakers talk about their careers and how they got to where they are and the kinds of work that they do. As you see, Jeffrey put on a slide on the screen that kind of divides some of the things that people have been kind of talking about in the chat. And so when folks are either graduates of food system programming or food systems related career work, there's different skill sets that are really valuable to have on a resume. So I'm not going to go through all of these. Feel free to either take a screenshot of the screen, or you will obviously get a recording of this webinar. So you'll get to replay all the great conversations that we've had this evening, and you'll get to have this more in depth so you can kind of see what these hard skills and soft skills are. But if you would like to talk more in depth about career goals, if you are a recent graduate, if you are pivoting in your career, one of the things that NAPSN does really, really well, and is our niche, is professional development and career chats, so to speak. We provide a 1 hour call for members. For folks who join NAPSN, you'll get to have a wonderful call with either me or with my co-director, Kim Hines, and she'll get to give you some really great tips and get to go over your resume and get to chat with you if that's something that you're interested in. So I've been kind of talking to some folks in the chat. So feel free to join us, join our membership. We have some other great things for members. But I did want to say before we drop off this webinar, for my three speakers who are hopefully still on our webinar, if you have like one really great piece of advice that you can drop in the chat for a skill set that you think is necessary to either step foot into the food systems world, or do you think that would help anybody really get their foot in the door in this career, I think we would love to hear your words, your wise wisdom. You could just drop that in the chat, and then folks can kind of read through any of our speakers who want to share that. But in the meantime, again, if you would like to join NAPSN, we have different levels of commitment that folks can either start with a free trial just to get their foot in, like looking at what we do and kinds of things that we provide as an organization. Or if you are not sure still, even joining the membership, feel free to reach out to either one of us, Kim Hines, who's behind the scenes right now, or me. We'll drop our emails. I think we're going to have our emails at the very last slide that we're going to present on the screen. And you can feel free to reach out to us, ask us any questions prior to joining or even after joining. So yeah, we would love to see you guys in our organization. And if you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to us and our speakers. If you guys have any tidbits or little bits of wisdom that you want to impart on our listeners tonight, feel free to drop that in the chat. And it's been a great night. Thank you so much to our wonderful hosts, Jeffrey and Sema. So you guys have been amazing. And Jeffrey, if you have any last minute words, please take it away.
Yeah, go ahead, Sema.
Okay. Thanks so much to Natalie and our speakers for these helpful suggestions. Very, very nice. Very good to learn. To close, we'd like to congratulate Alma M. of St. Hedwig, Texas, for being randomly selected from among 191 registrants tonight to receive a NAPSN annual membership this week. Congratulations, Alma M. of St. Hedwig, Texas.
And thank you for joining us tonight. This is the first of 4 episodes of the 9th season. We will have one in October, November, and December. All of the dates and information will be on the NAFSN website. Join us on October 8th for next month's episode, featuring Michelle Thorne of the Good Meat Project, Emily Reno of Mezcalada, and Melissa Terry from the University of Arkansas. It should be a very exciting episode as well. And to conclude, on behalf of our entire productions team here at NAFSN, including Natalie, Kim, Vivian, Ali, Ari, Akela, Audrey, Aya, Emily, Wendy, Daniela, Marie, and myself, as well as our guest co-host of this episode, Sema, we thank you for being here with us this evening, and we hope to see you again in October. Until then, we wish you well, and good night.
You've been listening to Finding Your Future in Food Systems, produced by the North American Food Systems Network. To learn more about our professional development opportunities, visit foodsystemsnetwork.org.